The small cafe buzzed with its usual afternoon rhythm, the clatter of dishes and low hum of conversation filling the space. Among the familiar faces, Emily moved gracefully between tables, balancing a tray of steaming coffee and sandwiches. She had always been a hard worker, but today felt different, as if something unknown hovered in the air, waiting. For a moment, she paused, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, unaware that her life was about to change forever. A black luxury car pulled up outside, its sleek body glinting under the muted sunlight. A man stepped out, tall, imposing, with a presence that demanded attention without a word. His tailored suit hugged his frame perfectly, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the cafe as if measuring everything and everyone. Emily noticed him immediately, though she didn't understand why her heart skipped a beat at the sight of a stranger. He walked in slow and deliberate, and every head turned, sensing the aura of wealth and authority he carried. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she approached him with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Table for one?" she asked softly, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. He nodded, and his gaze met hers briefly, piercing and unnerving, before he followed her to a corner booth. From the first moment, there was tension, like the air itself was charged around them. Emily couldn't look away, but she tried, forcing herself to focus on the menu, rather than the storm behind his eyes. The cafe seemed smaller suddenly, the chatter distant, as if the world had condensed to just the two of them. She placed the menu on the table carefully, aware of every subtle movement he made. "Emily," he said suddenly, his voice low and commanding, yet oddly intimate. She froze, startled, and glanced at him. I'm sorry, sir. How did you know my name?" she asked cautiously, her curiosity mingling with unease. His lips curved slightly into a rare smirk. "Fate has a way of speaking to those who don't believe in it," he murmured, leaning back, exuding calm authority. Emily's mind raced. He seemed to know more than he should, and the intensity in his gaze left her trembling. Are you here for business?" she asked, trying to maintain composure while her pulse quickened. He shook his head, almost imperceptibly. "No, Emily. I'm here because sometimes life chooses for us when we hesitate to choose for ourselves," he replied enigmatically. The conversation that followed was like a dance, cautious and measured. He asked questions, not about the cafe, not about the city, but about her past, her dreams, her fears. Emily, though hesitant at first, found herself answering, drawn in by the rare sincerity in his voice. There was an intensity there, one that made her chest tighten, as if she had been waiting for someone to truly see her. Hours seemed to pass unnoticed. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light through the cafe windows. Other customers came and went, but they were invisible to Emily and the man who called himself Alexander. Each word, each glance, felt deliberate, like a chess game where she was both the pawn and the player. She had never met someone so intimidating and yet so disarmingly gentle. At the end of his meal, Alexander stood abruptly. Emily felt a pang of loss, though she barely knew him. He handed her a card, sleek and black, with embossed gold lettering. "Call me," he said simply, then turned and left without another word. She stared at the card, unsure whether to feel exhilaration or fear. The air seemed heavier, charged with a promise she didn't yet understand. Days turned into nights, and Emily couldn't stop thinking about him. The card lay on her dresser, a silent invitation, a key to a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. Her friends noticed her distracted mood and teased her, but she barely heard them. The cafe felt different now, smaller, more mundane, while her thoughts were consumed with the man who had appeared like a shadow in her life. Finally, unable to resist, she called. His voice answered on the first ring.com, confident, yet soft enough to make her knees weak. "Emily, I was hoping you'd call," he said. They spoke for hours, planning a meeting that neither of them could put off. The line crackled with tension, excitement, and a strange sense of inevitability. She realized, with a shiver, that fate had not been random. When they met again, it was at a quiet, upscale restaurant, far from the cafe. Emily's heart pounded as she approached the table, unsure of what to expect. Alexander stood as she arrived, his presence overwhelming yet magnetic. "You came," he said simply, a hint of approval in his voice. She nodded, unable to find words, feeling as if the world had narrowed to the space between them. He gestured to the seat across from him, and as she sat, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Emily's eyes widened, confusion and fear mingling. "Before you speak, just listen," he said, voice calm, but with an intensity that made her shiver. She swallowed hard, sensing that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Alexander opened the box slowly, revealing a delicate ring, glinting under the soft lights. "Emily, I know this seems sudden, impossible even," he said, "but fate brought us together. I want you to marry me. Not as a whim, not as a game, but because I believe this is meant to be." Emily's hands shook, the room spinning slightly as she processed his words. Her mind reeled. A waitress, a simple life, and now a proposal from a man she barely knew but somehow felt she had always been waiting for. Fear battled excitement. Uncertainty warred with a strange, compelling certainty. She looked into his eyes and saw patience, respect, and something else, a promise, one that whispered she could trust him, even if the world told her otherwise. Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. I don't know what to say." Alexander leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice to a murmur that made her stomach twist. "Then say nothing. Just know that fate chose for us. That's all I ask. That's all it ever asks." She felt tears prick her eyes, not just from fear or uncertainty, but from the weight of knowing life had shifted irrevocably. The moment hung between them, delicate and heavy, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Emily finally nodded, a small, tentative gesture that carried more courage than she knew. I'll trust you," she whispered. Alexander's expression softened, relief and satisfaction flickering in his eyes. He reached across the table, brushing her hand gently with his fingers. As she left the restaurant that night, Emily felt as if the world had been rearranged. Fate, she realized, was not always gentle, but it was persistent. Alexander's hand on hers lingered in memory as she walked home, a steadying force she hadn't known she needed. And somewhere deep in her chest, she felt the first flutter of hope. She didn't yet know the challenges ahead, the scrutiny, the fear, or the sacrifices. But in that moment, the choice to trust, to leap, had been made. And Emily understood, in a way she hadn't before, that life often demanded boldness, even when the heart trembled. Fate had chosen, and now she would walk its path. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustments and revelations for Emily. She tried to return to normal life at the café, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Alexander appeared unexpectedly, showing up at the café or leaving messages that made her pulse race. Each encounter reminded her that her life had shifted beyond her understanding, tethered now to a man whose world was as vast as it was intimidating. Friends noticed her distracted demeanor, teasing her gently about the mysterious man she mentioned only vaguely. Emily smiled, hiding the truth, unsure how to explain fate, whispers of destiny, and a proposal that had changed everything. She didn't mind the secrecy. It made the moments she did spend with Alexander feel sacred, as if they existed in a bubble separate from the ordinary world. The contrast between her simple life and his luxurious existence made every interaction thrilling, almost surreal. One evening, Alexander invited Emily to his penthouse, a space that seemed impossibly vast and elegantly cold at first glance. She felt small as she entered, nerves prickling her skin, but he took her hand and guided her gently. "This is not just my home," he said softly. "It's where I want to build a life, maybe even ours, if you'll allow it." Emily's stomach tightened with anticipation and fear, but she nodded, feeling a strange courage swell inside her. They spent hours talking that night, about everything and nothing, about dreams, regrets, and hopes. Alexander's imposing presence softened as he spoke with sincerity, revealing layers that few ever saw. Emily realized that behind the ruthless exterior of a billionaire was a man shaped by loss, loneliness, and longing. She felt honored that he trusted her with these fragments of his life, and in turn, she began to share hers, the fears, the guilt, and the tiny joys she rarely admitted to anyone. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them deepened, fragile yet unbreakable. Alexander's gestures of care were subtle but constant, small acts that spoke louder than any declaration of love. He began involving her in his life, showing her his world not as an outsider, but as a partner. Emily marveled at the changes in herself, newfound confidence, the courage to speak up, and the ability to dream bigger than she had ever dared. Then came the night that would test both of them. Alexander invited her to a charity gala. A world so foreign to Emily, it left her breathless. She wore a gown he had chosen, simple but elegant, and when she caught her reflection, she barely recognized the woman looking back. "You look beautiful," he murmured, his eyes dark with admiration. Emily felt heat rush to her cheeks, caught between embarrassment and exhilaration, realizing she had entered a world that demanded poise she had never learned. The gala was a whirlwind of conversations, handshakes, and laughter that seemed to echo in a different dimension. Emily stuck close to Alexander, sensing the weight of expectations pressing down on her. She noticed people staring, whispering, and she felt vulnerable. But Alexander never let her feel alone. His hand on her back, a reassuring squeeze, reminded her that she was not navigating this strange world by herself. Later, as they stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city, Emily breathed in the cool night air. Alexander turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said quietly, "I know this has all been sudden. You could walk away at any moment, and I would understand. But you haven't." Emily shook her head, overwhelmed, and he continued, "That means you're choosing this, choosing me, and I want you to know, I would do anything to deserve that choice." Tears pricked Emily's eyes, and she took a step closer to him. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice trembling. "Everything is so fast, so different, but I want to try." Alexander's gaze softened, and he cupped her face gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then we'll try together," he whispered. "Step by step, fate brought us here, Emily, but it's courage that will keep us moving forward." The following months were not without challenges. Rumors circulated about Emily's sudden rise, from waitress to a woman in the billionaire's orbit. People questioned her motives, her background, and her worthiness, but Alexander shielded her, defending her quietly yet fiercely, making sure the world saw her as more than gossip. Emily, in turn, found strength she hadn't known she possessed, learning to navigate scrutiny with dignity and poise. There were moments of doubt, arguments, and misunderstandings, but each trial only solidified their bond. Emily learned to assert herself in the presence of people who had once intimidated her. Alexander learned patience, understanding that trust and love could not be demanded, only nurtured. Slowly, they built a rhythm together, a partnership where respect and care were the foundation. One quiet evening, they returned to the café where it all began. Emily walked in first, taking in the familiar smells of coffee and pastries, memories of her old life flooding back. Alexander followed, hand in hers, and the regular patrons turned to look, whispering softly. Emily smiled faintly, feeling a sense of completeness. This was the world she had known, now mingling seamlessly with the one she had chosen. She approached the counter where she once worked tirelessly, glancing at the worn menus and the familiar counters. Alexander stood behind her, observing, quiet and content. "I wanted to show you where it all started," he said gently. Emily nodded, heart full, realizing how far she had come. Her life had been rewritten, not by force or luck, but by choices, courage, and the strange, persistent hand of fate. As they left the cafe, stepping into the glow of the evening city lights, Emily felt the weight of the past and the promise of the future merge. Alexander held her hand firmly, a silent vow that no matter what came, they would face it together. And Emily understood, more clearly than ever, that sometimes life's most extraordinary turns arrived when you dared to trust the impossible. She looked at him and whispered, "Thank you for waiting for me." Alexander smiled, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "No, Emily, thank you for choosing me." In that moment, the cafe, the city, and the world beyond faded away. Only their shared path remained, one built on faith, courage, and the quiet power of love.